Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr, and also because we are going live here with Kevin Noon as well. First, Kevin, wait your turn. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's been an afternoon. I just finished recording Friday's morning scoop with Alex Gleitman, our good buddy Alex Gleitman. Really, really good show on Ohio State quarterback recruiting. Let me just take a nice drink of this piping hot cup of coffee and check if anything has happened since I hit stop on that recording.
In fact, perhaps something has happened, and as we get to that, first, Kevin, how are you?
Is this where I lay out for a long pause, or am I not part of that joke?
You do not pause.
I do not pause. Well, I'll jump on it quicker this time. Interesting times we live in. Interesting times. I'd done a earlier show and was just finishing up lunch and saw a cryptic message and sent it to you guys, and lo and behold, within 5 minutes we willed it into existence. So nothing's final yet, but I will let you guys carry the football forward on this one.
Yeah, the news coming out from Jon Wilner at the Wilner Hotline on Twitter, preeminent Pac-12 reporter insider, saying that USC and UCLA are headed to the Big Ten. Not finalized yet, but this is something that we have all talked about on several different shows about this possibility. And so the Big Ten looking at a 16-team conference, but I I think it's good for the Big Ten. I think the biggest beneficiary of this is probably UCLA because now are going to be forced to care about football. They will also have the money to care about football. And you look at I don't what the Pac-12 breakouts are in terms of TV revenue. I assume it's like $30 million a year or whatever. They're going to triple that coming to the Big Ten. And Tom, I think now we have the answer as to why the Big Ten television contracts that were supposed to be out by Memorial Day have not come out. I think that everybody had to go back to the drawing board when this Big Ten is like, oh, but wait, friends, we've got a couple of California markets that we're also going to be dropping in on this.
Yeah, that I think is a very good explanation for this. And it's also an explanation for why this is happening right now. Because the Big Ten TV contract is up after the 2020, it's up in the summer of 2023. So this is the last year of the current Big Ten TV contract. The reason this is happening now is because the Pac-12's TV contract is up after the 2023 season, so up in the summer of 2024. The way this works is the reason conferences stay together is because there's something called a grant of rights. That's something that's in your TV contract, and you essentially are signing over all of the TV money from your institution to the conference, and then the conference gives it back to you. But it basically it's like a little bit of a blood pact of, well, if we leave, you still have the money from our TV rights until the end of this contract. Well, if the contract is up in the summer of 2024, guess when this move is probably going to happen? I will bet a shiny nickel that it happens during the summer of 2024. As for the why, yeah, the TV contract money, I mean, the Pac-12 has been lagging behind the Big Ten and the SEC for quite a while. That's a function of Jim Delaney signing shorter TV contracts. The Pac-12 locked into a 10 or 12-year deal a while ago. And so they've been, as the TV rights numbers have gone up and up and up, the Pac-12 has been locked into their deal. The ACC is going to be in a similar position because they're locked into a deal through 2035 or 2036, if I remember correctly. They're going to, and they got their ACC network out of it, but now they're locked into that. So the why is because these Pac-12 schools, they have fallen way behind. The Big 12 and the SEC have completely separated from the rest of the country in terms of TV rights. That's only going to be more true now as you add a couple California markets. I mean, the Big Ten, there was a report that the Big Ten was looking at, in the neighborhood of $100 million per school per year, maybe a little under, maybe a little over. That number has only gone up now. The Pac-12 was going to be maybe half of that, give or take, depending. And that's a function of more people in the Midwest care about football, more people watch football in the Midwest. And frankly, the football is better in the Midwest. So you get more national interest there as well. And, the Pac-12 has all sorts of time slot issues and all that kind of stuff where You get those Pac-12 after dark games that only the real sickos like the three of us are staying up at to watch the 10:30 Cal at Washington State kind of game. Now you're going to be playing, USC at Ohio State or Michigan at UCLA, and those are a little bit more appointment viewing. Those are much bigger games. It's going to be a much bigger TV contract, and I think Tony, the big question for me: what happens to the alliance? That sacred alliance, the most important bond in all of college football, the ACC. Was it the ACC, the Pac-12? Yeah, ACC, Pac-12, and Big Ten. Does a man's word mean nothing, Tony? I really don't understand. I don't like what this says about our society.
Good point, Tom. Speaking of a man's word meaning nothing, Kevin, what are your thoughts on the Pac-12, USC, UCLA coming to the Big Ten, 2024? It looks like.
I can't wait for UCLA at Rutgers at 9 a.m. Pacific. That thing is going to draw huge out there, I tell you, on KTTV. LA, but for me, it's exciting. I'm a West Coast guy, grew up out there. As Gary Kay had mentioned, I'm going to be able to kind of relive, some of my roots. I'm going to get the super chat up here because we've got one. I'll get to it after my thoughts. I think that there's a lot here. Everybody was waiting for the Big Ten to make its move. We saw Texas and OU go to the SEC. It really appeared that all of the quote unquote free agents out there were kind of off the board, save Notre Dame, and Notre Dame never really seemed to be in play for the Big Ten Conference. They wanted to kind of have their cake and eat it too. And, the Pac-12 made some steps. I think that they went out and got themselves, a solid commissioner by thinking outside the box. But, apparently the whole time SC and UCLA were like, well, that's all well and good, but we're going to go get while the getting's good. And, I throw the question out there, too. Are we seeing one of the first opening moves of the Power 5 becoming more of a Power 4? I mean, I know there's still more power out there in terms of what's out in the Pac-12, but does the Pac-12 start getting cannibalized a little bit? And did the Big 12 move too soon in some of its pieces instead of kind of waiting to poach the Pac-12?
Well, clearly they did, because now what happens with the Pac-12? You lose two of your four biggest markets, teams, programs, schools, and now it becomes who dies off first, the Big 12 or the Pac-12, and it sure looks like, I would say the Big 12 looks more secure, but I also agree that they probably jumped too soon, even though they got some good markets. But I wonder if they had it to do over again, would you start to inquire about these Pac-12 schools? But also, I wonder if they did. And I wonder how well known, because this has been talked about for a couple of years in terms of USC leaving and other Pac-12 teams leaving. So it's not like this is unheard of. This has been suggested. So I wonder if there is some back-channel communications. But Tom, what do you think? Big 12, Pac-12, what's the footing there for both of those now?
We should probably jump to super chat too.
Yeah. We'll get to this very serious super chat after I let Tom talk.
This must be a very serious super chat if you're letting me talk first. It's very interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, because it feels like the Pac-12 is kind of out in left field. And I wonder if you end up with some kind of a merger between the Pac-12 and Big 12 when all is said and done, because you don't necessarily the Big 12 is not going to be a conference right now that has. I don't think I've seen an updated TV number for them with the new additions that they just made, and they just hired a new commissioner. Like yesterday, they hired a new commissioner. So I don't think I've seen an updated TV number for them, and I can't remember when the Big 12. I think the Big 12 contract is up in a few years. I don't know that there's anything there that's going to make them a massive draw where it's going to be, you're leaving the Pac-12 because you're going to make so much more money in the Big 12. I would guess, frankly, it's probably. All right, looks like we had a little bit of a weird technical difficulty there, but we're back now, hopefully for good. So I don't know where you guys lost me exactly, but talking about the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and who's going to be the survivor there between those two conferences. So I think my initial inclination is to say the Pac-12 just because you've got more established brands there. You've got more. You still have Oregon, you still have Washington, and those are schools that are geographically pretty far separated from the rest of the nation. So there's not, and I don't know that the updated Big 12, which could potentially still lose teams to the ACC, to the SEC. I don't know that the updated Big 12 with Cincinnati and UCF and those types of schools, BYU, those are not necessarily schools that are going to be able to turn that the existing Pac-12 into some big rights juggernaut. The Big 12 is not, even with those new schools, they're not getting $100 million a year like the Big 10 potentially is per school. They're probably not getting $50 million a year. They might not get $30 million a year, depending on, that was a league that was in the lower tier of rights. And they've now lost Oklahoma. They've now lost Texas. That's only going to hurt them. So that is, I don't think the Big 12 is a league that wins out there. I think it may be the Pac-12, if anything, but a lot of that is going to be predicated on what happens next. Does the ACC add West Virginia, for example? That's something that's been rumored. If the ACC adds West Virginia, well, that takes away one of the bigger brands left in the Big 12. If what happens with a school like Colorado? Colorado is a school that the Big Ten could very easily add. Denver is a significant and growing media market. That's a state that's adding a lot of population that, you're not having the same conversation about TV markets like you did in the Rutgers and Maryland edition kind of days where it was cable TV households. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. It's more, this is a state which is in a growing part of the nation in terms of population. So, is Colorado in that conversation? Or do you go get Washington and Oregon and add them potentially later? It feels to me like if they were going to do that, you're already talking to two schools in the Pac-12. So why wouldn't you talk to four schools in the Pac-12 and just move all four of them at the same time? But, maybe they didn't, maybe that at that point basically kills the Pac-12 if you're taking four at a time. So I guess the short version of that long answer, TLDR, I would bet on the Pac-12 overall, just because you've got more established brands there. If one of those, Pac-12 versus Big 12 is going to survive as a major conference, I would bet on the Pac-12. But a lot of it's going to be predicated on, okay, we've had this move. Now what's the next move? There was, does West Virginia go to the ACC? Does Oklahoma State join the ACC? I mean, what happens next is going to go a long way towards determining, whatever the next two schools to jump are, that's going to determine Pac-12 versus Big 12, who survives.
Tom's answer was so long, he killed the stream. Once again, thank you for everybody who stayed with us as we had some technical glitches, because it, just like it wouldn't be a Tom and Tony show without, somebody going around like on a little gator or something like that. We're going to have a glitch every now and then. Got a couple super chats in the can. By our own rules, we got to get to them. First of all, Tony Gerdeman's ketchup bottle. Let's get the most important question out of the way. How many California well-done steaks am I going to ruin in the future? Tony, your ketchup bottle would like to know.
The main kind of steaks I'm eating in California will be like carne asada, in a taco or in a burrito. So those are all pretty, I'm not going to say well done, but if you've never had a taco with ketchup on it, I would recommend it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't actually put ketchup on steaks, not since I was like 14 years old. So 24 years old.
Terrible.
I like the fact that you go into the Mexican place and say, give me the Rojo sauce on that. And they're like, the red salsa, sir. It's like, no, the Heinz Rojo sauce, please.
All right. And then James Gilmore jumps in with a super chat. Thanks, James. Disclaimer, I don't understand how TV deals and other brand deals work, but if I was the Big Ten, I would be calling Oregon and Utah yesterday.
It's interesting to me that they're they're good going from 14 to 16, but I'm with you, Tom. It seems like if they're going to add some more, they would do it in this move, and maybe they are, and maybe there will be a couple more as they see like, well, if USC and UCLA are going, can is Oregon asking, hey, can we go? Is Utah asking, hey, can we go? And then you become an 18 team conference, but I don't know if they're wanting to keep it at 16 for pods. At this point, we know divisions are going away. So if you get rid of divisions, there's really no difference between 16 or 18 in my mind. It's just a matter of how often you're going to be playing all of these different teams. And if you're adding teams from out west, you don't necessarily need to play them all that often, at least for the teams like east of the Mississippi or east of, say, the Ohio River, I guess, in this scenario, maybe Ohio State is Big Ten West, but you don't need to send Maryland to UCLA every other year. Like they don't need to be playing all the time. So I think if you add a couple more, I would love to see it, frankly, but also it's going to take away the number of times that we get to go to USC or UCLA, which I've never been to USC. Obviously, we've been to UCLA, quote unquote, a couple of times. I wouldn't mind being there for as I tweeted, a 9 a.m. kickoff local, maybe a big 9 a.m. Saturday on Fox, if you will, with these, because at this point, if you're going to be in the Big Ten, you're going to have to play these noon kickoffs.
We're going to be doing the pregame show at 6 a.m. local. I want to get to a question. I want to get to a question that I think is really good from Yakov. Lincoln Riley went to the Pac-12 for an easier path to the playoffs. May not work out that way.
Well, that's an interesting and it's an interesting question because again, we don't know. There's so many things we don't. He dies, as a famous boxer once said. So we're going to keep going. So let's see, where were we? We were talking about the Pac-12. Let's first real quickly hit on something that I think is an important thing that we got to go through in terms of who else is going to be potentially a candidate at some point. Someone asked earlier about Colorado and Utah, or Washington and Utah, or Oregon and Utah. One thing that's a super important point we got to make here is that the Big Ten membership is pretty much predicated on whether your institution is a member of the Association of American Universities. So that's a group called AAU, not the basketball AAU, different AAU. So the Association of American Universities is just basically a group of the most prestigious national research universities. And you as a football fan probably don't give a crap whether a school is an AAU school or not, but the school presidents, who are the ones who actually make the deciding votes on these things, they care very much. So I have pulled up, as a professional podcaster, I have pulled up a very official list from Wikipedia, and I'm going to scroll through it and tell you which Pac-12 schools, from the reverse alphabetical order, which Pac-12 schools are members of the AAU, just because that's sort of that's like the table stakes to join the Big Ten. There is the only school who is not a member of the AAU who's in the Big Ten is the University of Nebraska. They were a member of the AAU when they joined the Big Ten and then got booted out. That's due to a really weird technicality because their research hospital is on the University of Nebraska Omaha campus, not the Lincoln campus. These are all things that university presidents care about that you don't. But that's the only school that is not an AAU school that's currently a Big Ten school. So University of Washington, they are an AAU school. So they're at least in this conversation. University of Utah is there. University of Southern California, obviously, if we're having this conversation about them. Oregon is. Kansas is, if we're looking at potential Big 12 schools, that's someone to kind of keep an eye on. Colorado is. UCLA obviously is, as we're talking about them. Cal is a member of that. University of Arizona. Stanford is. Just scrolling through here to see if I'm missing anyone else. Looks like that's it. So, Colorado, Utah, Stanford, Cal, UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington. So, schools that you're probably not going to see added for both football reasons and academic reasons include like Wazoo, Oregon State, Arizona State, schools like that. So, that's, I think, an important thing to just kind of have in the back of your mind when you're having the, okay, who might be next conversation, because, who's next conversation is going to be the point where I think you really see this whole sport of college football change forever one way or another, and that's the point at which we have are there 4 super conferences that are 16 teams? Are there 2 super conferences or 3 super conferences that are 18 to 20 teams? Because, we're talking about the Pac-12 and the Big 12, who's going to survive that? And the answer could be neither. That's an entirely possible scenario here, that you end up with Washington and Oregon also joining the Big Ten, and Oklahoma State and Houston join the ACC, and Cincinnati and BYU, or whoever you want to pick, Kansas joins the ACC as well, and all of a sudden, ta-da! You have just 3 power conferences. That's something that we don't have quite enough information yet to know exactly where that's going to go, but it feels like that's something that the next round, let's assume that the USC and UCLA pieces of this are all accurate. Then that's, the next move after that is going to be what really is kind of the tip off as to where this sport is headed. Is the Pac-12 going to just add some Big 12 schools, and then you'll have those 4 conferences, the power conferences, and no more Big 12? Or is there going to be something else entirely? That's going to be interesting to watch. One thing, and we are going to wrap this up relatively soon because we've had many, many technical issues, and we're going to end up Tony Gerderman and I are going to do a recorded episode offline, I think, and do it as a recorded episode because the live stream is just not playing nicely with us today for whatever reason. But one thing that I think is an important point here, this is all not finalized. It is from Jon Wilner, who was a newspaper reporter in San Jose for decades and decades. He's still an active reporter out in Pac-12 country. He is, of the Pac-12 sources, in terms of the people most plugged in with the Pac-12 conference, Jon Wilner is the absolute apex, the absolute top of the list. Yes, this has not been officially approved yet, and he said it was, has to be approved by, the people who have to approve it. That's university presidents. Almost certainly are the people he's, saying the Big 12 presidents have not officially approved this. But if Jon Wilner's putting it out, that is almost as good as gold to me. So, that's why we're doing a show on a little more speculative information than we would typically do as reporters. But this is something where the person who's reporting this, it is not sliced bread on the Texas A&M message board. This is someone who's one of the most credible, one of the most plugged in journalists in the country in terms of college sports. So if Jon Wilner's saying it, it is probably going to happen. So
I want to jump in real quick. I mean, other sources have been coming on doing their own due diligence and saying that. Here's a tweet from Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic. Just got off the phone with someone who believes this eventually leads to 2 mega conferences, the Big Ten and SEC, with 20 or more members apiece. So, there's certainly a lot of other stuff circulating here. And while Texas and OU seem to really be kind of the opening dance for this, the Big Ten has kind of stepped in, but there are going to be some more pieces, I think, that are going to happen. How quickly that goes, what that means for grant of rights and everything. I'll be tuning into Tom and Tony's show to hear a lot of stuff there, because when it really comes down to parsing out the minutia of this, Tom does a fantastic job. I just like talking big picture, and Tony just likes ketchup.
Yeah, this is going to be – there are a lot of variables we still have to go through here, and we'll do this. We'll drop a whole recorded episode of Buckeye Weekly. It'll be all new stuff, some of the same conversations, but all new. It'll be new to you, so that'll be fun. But we'll I think one of the things that we talked a little bit in depth about the grant of rights concept at the beginning of the show, but what we'll do is, the one thing that can change that, where, under the grant of rights, the ACC is not going to, the ACC, you can't get out of the ACC contract until 2035 without giving up your TV rights. So if North Carolina decided they wanted to join the Big Ten, well, they probably couldn't do that until 2035. Unless unless the conference blows up. If the conference blows up and everyone goes their separate ways and the conference just dissolves, then, if there's not enough teams to form a conference, well, then there's no conference to have enforce a TV contract, and therefore there's no more contract, and then you could potentially move. So, does the Big Ten, if let's just game this out, and well, this is all hypothetical, this is not any information that I have. Let's just say, the ACC right now is at 14 teams. Let's say the SEC and the Big Ten both say we're going to take 3 teams from the ACC, and the Big Ten. You've heard the Big Ten linked to schools like North Carolina and Virginia, schools like that are kind of geographically consistent with, the Big Ten footprint, or at least kind of contiguous to the Big Ten footprint, and also AAU members. If the Big Ten takes 3 and the SEC adds Florida State and Clemson and someone else, then the ACC is down, you're down 6 members, or you're down 8 members if people take more than that. And, at that point, you don't really have a conference anymore. And then what happens to Notre Dame? Does Notre Dame join the Big Ten? I mean, these are all kind of interesting conversations to have. And this is all stuff that's very speculative right now. The Pac-12 is the safest conference to raid right now because their TV deal expires, again, as I said, in the summer of 2024, which means your grant of rights expires in the summer of 2024. So 2 years from now, don't expect the USC and UCLA to be playing football in the Big Ten in 2023, but 2024, I think there's a decent possibility you will see, USC. I can't wait for USC to fly into glamorous Iowa City, or fancy Champaign, Illinois. USC in Champaign, Illinois on November 13th. Man, Kevin, some people may say, I want to see Ohio State play a regular season game in the Rose Bowl, or USC play at Michigan. No. USC in Champaign on November 13th. Man, that is the College Football Sickos account is already excited about that. I can't wait.
Just wait until you have Northwestern going to Pauley Pavilion for basketball or whatever. I mean, we're just looking at it from we've looked at it obviously from the college football side. We've looked at it a little bit too in terms of, AAU membership and what that means and the, kind of the bigger picture things. But, this isn't a football only move. This is conference affiliation change. This isn't we're going to divorce football from Big Ten and we're going to create this super conference. This is a big change in terms of the conferences and everything else. So, I mean, this is going to go down to everything. And, is SC going to get itself a men's ice hockey team? I mean, probably not. I mean, but, there's just a lot of things that you can think about. There's a lot of fun you can have with this. I probably, while you guys are recording your show, I may get a Big Noon kickoff ready or a Big Meat kickoff ready for tomorrow while I'm down in Cincinnati to run on this, because I've got a lot of thoughts. And obviously, Tony must have been the fly in the ointment. We get him off the show and our Wi-Fi stabilizes. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
The universe has only so many constants. One of them is Tony ruins everything. That's okay. We still love him. He's still our very special boy. And we're going to wrap this up here in just a minute because we do want to. I do want to get going with Tony on recording a new show. But I think you mentioned USC ice hockey kind of in jest, but what does this do for Big Ten baseball? Because all of a sudden now you've got 2 members in Southern California where you can play all sorts of league stuff down there. Maybe, do teams train down there? Do teams do you have the Big Ten? I think the Big Ten teams generally will go down into Florida or places like that. Maybe the Big Ten baseball and Big Ten softball is playing a lot of games out in California now, and you can make it a little bit more of a year-round sport. And does that, what does that do for UCLA and USC baseball? But also, what does it do for Big Ten baseball? Because those are sports that UCLA has an incredible baseball history, and USC has an incredible baseball history. So does UCLA. UCLA fairly recently just produced Garrett Cole and Trevor Bauer off the same UCLA team. I mean, that's some pretty good star power. UCLA or USC over the years under Rod Dedeaux was one of the greatest college baseball programs of all time. That's where Mark McGuire went to college back in the day. Randy Johnson. I mean, these are like big time powerhouse programs historically. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch as well. So I think we're going to wrap this up right now, and it is killing me to wrap this up with so many awesome people here watching and good questions coming in and all that kind of stuff. But
we need to go live again next week. Maybe we switch platforms to see if that helps.
Yeah, we'll try something else next week. So apologies for the technology not cooperating, but we will have Tevin, as he said, we'll try and do a Big Me kickoff show. So you'll get that. Tony and I will get a Buckeye Weekly episode recorded. That'll be up in the Buckeye Weekly podcast feeds. We'll also obviously drop that here on YouTube. And so you'll have that coming hopefully a little later on this afternoon. So apologies for the technology not cooperating, but we will hopefully you guys have found this informative and gotten a little bit better idea kind of what this might mean and where things might be headed. But we'll wrap up for now. Thank you guys all for joining us. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. We really do appreciate that. That will help other folks find these shows, including the shows that don't blow up a couple times in the middle of them. And it helps help folks find this channel. If you hit the bell, subscribe to our channel, get notified every time we go live. That way, when we go live, you get notified so you don't miss it. And there you go. And also, if you want to find these in podcast form, if you have a long commute or walk the dog or whatever, check us out on whatever podcast platform you prefer to listen to on. You can subscribe to if you type in Buckeye Scoop, you're going to find all of our great shows. I do the Morning Scoop, which is a daily 15 to 20 minute show, just touching on kind of Ohio State specific stuff, but sometimes some broader college football things as well. We're doing a season preview series right now as well. So preview of some of Ohio State's upcoming opponents. We've got Notre Dame coming up soon, and a couple more Penn States coming up early next week. So a lot of good ones coming up there. So that's the Morning Scoop. Tony and I do the Buckeye Weekly Show. That's this. So we do multiple episodes every week. If there's, Kevin mentioned a commitment potentially coming tomorrow from cornerback Jermaine Matthews. If and when that happens, we'll have an instant reaction show about that as well. And another potential commitment coming on Monday with defensive end Darren Reed. So it could be a very busy time for Ohio State football. So that's Buckeye Weekly. That's the Morning Scoop. Kevin does the Big Me Kickoff podcast. Alex Gleitman does Around the Oval. He had a fantastic show this week with Mark Givler talking about what's next for the 2023 class for Ohio State. And then Mark Givler and Bill Green do Gives in the Bank, which is always a fantastic recruiting show. I'm going to guess they have potentially some instant reaction stuff as well on upcoming commits when they happen. So those are all worth subscribing to. And if you are listening to any of those and you like them, leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find their shows. And we really, really, truly do appreciate that, because it's a nice thing you can do that doesn't take too long, but that helps us out quite a bit. So that'll do it. Thank you guys all for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.